Emily Carter was the heart of Hawthorne, a beloved schoolteacher whose kindness touched everyone she met. James Holloway was the bitter ex-boyfriend who couldn't let her go. Mark Reeves was the reclusive neighbor with a disturbing obsession. Luke Garson was the handyman who knew her house inside and out. Victor Hayes was the drifter who lurked in the shadows. John Price and Eric Mills were the co-workers with secrets to hide. When Emily vanished without a trace, these 6 men became suspects in a case that would unravel the town's darkest secrets. But as the investigation dug deeper, what started as a simple disappearance turned into a web of lies, obsession, and betrayal that no one saw coming. And at the center of it all was a horrifying truth that would leave Hawthorne scarred forever. Hawthorne was the kind of town where nothing ever changed. Its quiet streets were lined with picket fences, and the hum of small-town life created a sense of safety that people took for granted. Emily Carter fit perfectly into this picture. She had lived there all her life, working as a schoolteacher at the local elementary school. With her warm smile and friendly demeanor, she was well-liked by students, parents, and neighbors alike. Her life seemed ordinary, predictable even, until the morning she didn't show up for work. At first, no one panicked. People assumed she had caught a cold or overslept. But when the school secretary tried calling and got no answer, concerns started to grow. Emily was known for being punctual, always the first to arrive and the last to leave. By lunchtime, the principal had called her parents, who hadn't seen or heard from her since the previous evening. Panic began to set in. The real fear started when Emily's car was found later that afternoon. It was parked on the side of a quiet country road about 5 miles out of town, far from anywhere she might have had reason to go. The car doors were locked, and her purse and phone were missing. Inside, there was a half-empty coffee cup and a neatly folded work uniform on the passenger seat. Nothing looked out of place, yet something felt wrong. Police were quick to arrive at the scene, cordoning off the area and searching for any clues. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no blood, no disturbed dirt near the vehicle. The keys were still in the ignition. It was as if Emily had simply stepped out of the car and vanished into thin air. Word of her disappearance spread quickly, and by nightfall, nearly everyone in Hawthorne was out searching for her. Flashlights bobbed through the nearby woods, and volunteers combed through fields and ditches. Despite their efforts, no trace of Emily was found. As the hours turned into days, the search became more desperate. Police dogs were brought in but failed to pick up a solid trail. Helicopters circled overhead, scanning the thick forest surrounding the town, but there was nothing. It was as though the earth had swallowed her whole. Emily's family and friends were devastated. Posters with her picture went up in every store window and on telephone poles. Candlelight vigils were held, and prayers were whispered, but hope began to fade. Behind the scenes, investigators were piecing together Emily's last known movements. They spoke to her coworkers, neighbors, and anyone who had seen her in the days leading up to her disappearance. The timeline was murky, but one thing became clear: Emily hadn't gone willingly. As more details emerged, the police started to focus on 6 men who had crossed paths with her recently. Each had a connection to Emily, and each seemed to have something to hide. What had started as a search for a missing woman was quickly turning into something far more sinister. As the investigation deepened, 6 men emerged as persons of interest, each with a different connection to Emily Carter. The first was James Holloway, her ex-boyfriend. Their relationship had ended almost a year earlier, but people close to Emily mentioned that James hadn't taken the breakup well. He had shown up uninvited to her workplace a few times, and there were whispers about heated arguments in public. James denied any involvement in her disappearance, insisting he had moved on. Yet investigators noted inconsistencies in his story about his whereabouts on the night Emily vanished. The second suspect was Mark Reeves, Emily's neighbor. A quiet man in his early 40s, Mark lived alone and rarely interacted with others. Despite his reclusive nature, he often lingered outside his house, watching the street. Investigators discovered that he had taken a particular interest in Emily, even going so far as to photograph her without her knowledge. When his home was searched, officers found dozens of these pictures pinned to a wall in his basement. Mark claimed he had never harmed her, explaining that his fascination was harmless admiration. but the evidence painted him as a deeply disturbed man. Luke Garson, the third suspect, had been hired as a handyman to make repairs at Emily's house a week before her disappearance. Described as friendly and approachable, Luke had no prior connection to Emily, but had been seen working late into the evening the Friday before she went missing. He admitted to having developed a crush on her, but insisted their interactions were professional. Investigators were skeptical when they found tools in his truck that matched markings on the lock of Emily's back door, raising concerns that he may have returned uninvited after completing his work. Victor Hayes was the fourth suspect, a drifter who had been spotted around town in the weeks leading up to Emily's disappearance. With no fixed address and a history of petty crimes, Victor fit the profile of someone capable of violence. Witnesses claimed to have seen him loitering near Emily's house, but Victor denied knowing her at all. His fingerprints, however, were found on a discarded coffee cup inside Emily's abandoned car, tying him to the scene. The fifth and sixth suspects were co-workers of Emily from the local factory, John Price and Eric Mills. Both men had minor criminal records, John for theft and Eric for disorderly conduct. They worked the night shift together and initially provided alibis for one another, but surveillance footage showed them leaving work hours earlier than they claimed. Investigators uncovered that Eric had once asked Emily out, only to be rejected, while John's girlfriend reported that he had come home late and nervous on the night Emily disappeared. With 6 suspects and mounting circumstantial evidence, the case grew more complex. Each man's story seemed plausible at first, yet cracks began to form under closer scrutiny. Secrets unraveled, revealing motives rooted in jealousy, obsession, and anger. The investigators faced a tangled web of half-truths and lies, and as pressure mounted, so did the tension gripping the town of Hawthorne. 2 weeks after Emily Carter's disappearance, the search for answers took a grim turn. A hiker exploring the dense woods outside Hawthorne stumbled upon something that would shatter the town's fragile hope. Hidden beneath a thin layer of dirt and leaves was a shallow grave. The sight was disturbing. Emily's body lay curled in the earth, her hands bound with a length of rope and a crumpled piece of paper tucked inside her blouse. The handwritten message read, "She deserved this." News of the discovery spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through the quiet community. Investigators quickly cordoned off the area, treating it as a primary crime scene. Forensic teams combed through every inch, searching for traces of the killer. The condition of Emily's body suggested she had been killed the night she disappeared, but there were no clear signs of a struggle. Instead, the meticulous way she had been bound and buried hinted at someone methodical, someone who had taken the time to cover their tracks. The autopsy confirmed the worst fears. Emily had died from strangulation, and the bruising on her wrists and ankles indicated she had been restrained for hours before her death. There were no defensive wounds, no scratches or broken nails, suggesting she had either been drugged or too terrified to resist. Toxicology reports later revealed traces of sedatives in her system, deepening the suspicion that her killer had planned every step in advance. Investigators zeroed in on the 6 suspects. Evidence collected at the scene included fibers matching industrial work gloves and smudges of grease on the rope used to bind Emily. The grease, in particular, was a critical lead, as it pointed to someone familiar with tools or machinery. This narrowed the focus to John, Eric, and Luke, all of whom had access to similar materials through their jobs. Yet the crime scene raised more questions than answers. There were no footprints leading to or from the grave, no discarded tools, and no signs of a vehicle nearby. It was as if the killer had floated in and out without leaving a trace. The only other piece of evidence was the note, but handwriting analysis yielded no matches among the suspects. It seemed deliberate, a taunt designed to mislead investigators. Adding to the puzzle, cell phone records revealed that Emily's phone had pinged off a tower several miles away nearly 2 hours after her estimated time of death. Investigators began to wonder if someone else had been involved, perhaps to dispose of evidence or divert attention. As suspicion deepened, the town's unease turned into paranoia. Neighbors began to look at one another differently, unsure of who could be trusted. Rumors swirled, and theories multiplied. The discovery of Emily's body marked the end of hope, but the beginning of a darker mystery, one that suggested the crime was not just a random act, but part of something far more sinister, involving secrets the town was not ready to confront. Just as investigators felt they were closing in on Emily Carter's killer, the case took a shocking turn that unraveled their assumptions. Surveillance footage from a gas station nearly 40 miles away revealed an image that seemed impossible. Emily was alive, at least for a few hours after her supposed time of death. The timestamp on the video showed her entering the store and speaking with an unidentified man dressed in a dark hoodie. She didn't appear distressed, and there was no visible sign that she was being held against her will. The footage challenged the timeline investigators had painstakingly built and cast doubt on the assumption that Emily had been killed shortly after her disappearance. The man in the footage didn't match the description of any of the 6 suspects already under investigation. This revelation opened the door to the possibility of a 7th person, someone who had either lured Emily away willingly or coerced her under the threat of violence. Investigators were forced to retrace their steps, revisiting the alibis of the 6 suspects and scouring nearby towns for anyone matching the man's description. Simultaneously, forensic analysis of the rope used to bind Emily yielded another discovery. Traces of DNA were present, but they matched not 1 but 2 individuals. Neither profile matched any of the 6 suspects, leaving investigators baffled. The evidence pointed to the involvement of more than 1 person, possibly working together. It also suggested that the crime was premeditated, with careful planning to avoid detection. As the investigation expanded, more unsettling details came to light. A search of Emily's phone records revealed a series of text messages sent in the days before her disappearance. The messages, later traced to a burner phone, were vague but hinted at a secret relationship. Investigators speculated that Emily might have known the man in the footage and had planned to meet him, but something had gone terribly wrong. The texts abruptly stopped the night she vanished, leaving no further clues about the man's identity. To complicate matters further, the DNA on the rope also matched fibers found in the trunk of Emily's car. This raised the disturbing possibility that her killer, or accomplices, had transported her body after her death, moving it from one location to another in an attempt to mislead investigators. The theory gained traction when cadaver dogs picked up faint traces of decomposition in a storage unit rented under a fake name just outside town. Inside, police found more rope and a tarp matching the material from the burial site. But the unit had been cleaned so thoroughly that no fingerprints remained. The discoveries painted a picture of a crime far more complex than anyone had anticipated. Investigators began to suspect that Emily's death wasn't the work of a single person acting impulsively, but the result of a calculated plan involving multiple players. With no clear answers, the town's fear deepened, and whispers of conspiracy spread like wildfire. Emily's murder had become more than just a tragedy. It was now a mystery that seemed designed to stay unsolved. Months passed, and the investigation into Emily Carter's murder remained tangled in unanswered questions and conflicting evidence. The 6 original suspects continued to be scrutinized, but the discovery of new DNA profiles and surveillance footage had shifted the focus. Investigators were under mounting pressure to deliver answers, and the case took yet another turn when a search of Mark Reeves's home uncovered a hidden compartment in his basement. Inside, officers found letters, dozens of them, written by Emily. They were addressed to someone named Dee and detailed a secret relationship she had been involved in for months. The letters spoke of passion, but also fear, describing Dee as someone charming yet possessive. Emily's words hinted at an attempt to break off the relationship, but she expressed concern about what Dee might do if pushed too far. Investigators combed through records and discovered that Dee was Daniel Harris, a man with a violent past. He had served time for assault before disappearing from public records. Further digging revealed he had been living under a false identity just a few towns away. When police tracked him down, he initially denied knowing Emily, but mounting evidence, phone records, matching DNA, and receipts placing him near the gas station forced his confession. Daniel admitted that he and Emily had planned to leave town together. However, he claimed she changed her mind at the last minute, threatening to expose their affair. Enraged and feeling betrayed, he said he killed her in a fit of anger. But the confession didn't explain everything. Investigators still had questions about the involvement of the 6 original suspects, and their doubts were soon validated. As police continued piecing the evidence together, they uncovered a web of complicity. Each of the 6 men had been dragged into the crime, not as direct participants in the murder, but as accomplices to the cover-up. Daniel had exploited their weaknesses, Mark's obsession, James's jealousy, and John's criminal past, coercing them with threats and blackmail. Some had unknowingly provided materials, like the rope and tarp, while others had assisted in disposing of evidence out of fear or guilt. Luke, the handyman, admitted to helping Daniel move Emily's car, believing she was still alive and that it was just a scare tactic. Eric and John had altered their timelines to cover for Daniel, hoping to avoid police attention due to their prior offenses. Even Victor, the drifter, confessed to being paid to keep watch while Daniel transported Emily's body. The revelations stunned the town. What initially appeared to be a crime committed by one person turned out to be a chain of events involving manipulation, fear, and desperation. Daniel Harris received a life sentence without parole for murder, while the 6 men faced varying charges ranging from obstruction of justice to accessory after the fact. Emily Carter's case left the community of Hawthorne forever changed. The layers of betrayal and complicity exposed a darkness hidden beneath the surface of an ordinary town, serving as a chilling reminder that evil can wear many faces, and sometimes those faces are all too familiar.